can't find the part. The thing fell into the sea. Oh my goodness. Oh, that container that fell into the sea. Oh, crying out. Go call Poseidon, my uncle, and get him to send his Nereids out to find it, because it's freezing here, and if we don't get that part, hell will freeze over, okay? Get it? Find that part. Hello? Hello? It's been a while since I saw you last. It has. And so, as you can see, it's still cold down here. Oh, and I've got to go up for spring soon. Oh, we've had a winter with no furnace. I'm not happy. Not happy. But let's change the subject. Let's change the subject, shall we? I have a new play for you. Yes, I do. Yes, I do. I have a new play. And I'm not sure if you know it. I'm not sure how many people know a lot of the history plays. I did do a history play with Richard. Now I'm going all long way back towards the beginning of that big long cycle. And we are going to look at Henry IV Part 1. I know I'm doing the history plays entirely out of order, but this is the order in which I'm encountering them. So, Henry IV Part 1. And in this, Henry, who was formerly Henry Bolingbroke and is now King Henry IV, having taken the throne from Richard II, is lamenting the fact that his son Hal, now before we go any further, there are 3 Henrys in this play. There is King Henry, who will be referred to as Henry. There is the Prince of Wales, his son, who is Prince Henry, who shall be referred to as Hal. And then there is Henry Percy, who is the son of one of the backers when King Henry, with Henry Bolingbroke, and wanted to take the throne from Richard II. And he is known as Hotspur. King Henry is in his throne room, and he is wishing to go on crusade to expiate his guilt from having deposed Richard. Now, Henry is unable to do this as the Scots have just risen up and Glendower in Wales is arcing up. And basically, because there was a change of king, this has created, and not a succession of king, a change of king, a rebellion. This has meant that other upstarts in the land have decided that they're going to have a go too. And so up in Scotland, Douglas is having a go, and Glendower is having a go, and has taken one of the noblemen prisoners, who is Hotspur's brother-in-law. But Hotspur at the moment is covered in glory because he has been up and has defeated Douglas up in Scotland. And Henry is hearing reports of what a great and gallant soldier he is. And he wishes that his Henry, Hal, could be more like him. Because Hal is not the gallant soldier. Prince Henry, Hal, is spending his time in taverns with ruffians and thieves and really wastrel type people. Now, this is very much upsetting his father, who very much would like his son to be more like Hotspur. So he's he is unhappy about this. He receives word that the battle has been won and Hotspur has taken prisoners, but for some reason Hotspur will not release his prisoners to the king. And the king is not terribly impressed with this and insists that Hotspur and his uncle and his father come and join and explain what is happening here. Meanwhile, Hal has come to pay a visit at the local tavern on his great friend Sir John Falstaff. Sir John Falstaff was very funny. He reminds me of my brother cousin Dionysus. Lots to drink, and great fun to be around. And Hal is being upbraided by Falstaff in a very teasing manner. They tease each other backwards and forwards about leading him, an honourable knight, off the path of goodness and into a life of vice. Pons, who is a friend of Hal and Falstaff, more particularly Falstaff, suggests to Falstaff that they rob some travellers, because this is what Falstaff does. When Hal suggests that this is not the most honourable actions or virtuous actions for a knight, Falstaff says, there is nothing but innocence in following one's own vocation. So, Falstaff would like Hal to join in the fun of robbing these travellers, but Hal will not agree to that. Pons tells Falstaff, I will get Hal's agreement. Of course, when Hal and Pons are alone, Pons tells Hal that the fun in this will be to set Falstaff, Bardolph and Pistol up to rob the travellers and then to rob them and watch the story afterwards. So this is what they plan to do. Hal, meanwhile, reflects that everything he is doing is all a farce. It is all for show. It is all for people will think me so terrible that when I reform and become king, I will cover myself in the glory that is currently missing from my noble self. The king, now back in the palace, is having an audience with Hotspur and Hotspur's father and his uncle. The king is not very happy about the way that any of them have been behaving, particularly, though Hotspur manages to convince the king that he wasn't denying His Majesty the prisoners, but the messenger from the king came and was so effeminate and so not a soldier, and demanded of him his prisoners in such a way that there was no way he could have given them to him, given that he was all hot and tired and worn out from battle. And the king listens to this with a, okay, I'll take your meaning. But watch it. Hotspur then wishes to plead for his brother-in-law Mortimer, who has been captured by Glendower, and the king refuses to ransom. This is the Welsh lord. He's a rebellious lord, and he's captured Mortimer. And the king refuses to pay ransom for this, Mortimer can go rot for all he cares. Hotspur is not happy, and he is very, very angry. He's Hotspur for a reason, very hot-tempered young man. He is extremely annoyed at this, and his family have grievances against the king because his family had helped the king become king. They believe that he owes them and that he hasn't paid up, and that as he hasn't paid up and as they have an equal right to the throne as he does, then perhaps it's about time to remind him who owes who what. And now Hotspur, the gallant Hotspur, is in rebellion against the king. Meanwhile, Falstaff is lying in wait, waiting for these travellers to come along so that he can rob them. He's not very good at this because he's already lost his horse and he doesn't like walking and he really can't see much around him, but they still manage to rob the travellers because the poor travellers are rather scared and, understandably, they give up their money and flee, and Falstaff and his friends think that, yes, we've done this. Meanwhile, Hal and Pons, who've been watching, come down with their swords roaring, and Falstaff, Pistol and Bardolph run, leaving Hal and Pons with the booty. Now, Hotspur discovers that raising a rebellion is not nearly as easy as he thought. And he's had letters from his friends who aren't really interested in raising an army against the king. And so this turns out as a bit more frustrating than he thought. And problem. Anyone could tell you that was not going to be a great idea. But so he's getting frustrated. He is going to Glendower, where his brother-in-law is, and his wife asks where he's going, but he will not tell her, and back and forth in a teasing conversation. But eventually he tells her that he will send for her. He will send for her. So she agrees and he leaves. Now, that evening, in the tavern, Hal and Pons are waiting for Falstaff to return. And they decide to tease the poor waiter, who they tease the poor waiter between them. And while they're waiting, just to entertain themselves. And meanwhile, in the meantime, they're waiting for Falstaff to return from his great theft. When Falstaff returns, he comes with a beaten up sword, and Bardolph and Pistol have bloodied noses, and he has a tale to tell of how he was set upon by brigands after the robbery. That the brigands start at 2, then become 5, 7, 11 brigands. Hal and Pons allow him just enough rope, keep eking it out until the story is so huge. But the joke comes when Hal and Pons let him in on the fact that they were the brigands. There were two of them, and they robbed them. And Falstaff is trapped in something he doesn't like very much called the truth. Truth is not a friend of Falstaff's, but he can spin this. Falstaff is a master of spinning this. Of course, we did not fight you off. Of course, I recognized your majesty and did not wish to harm you. I recognize this. One can, even cloaked, one can recognize Hercules. One can recognize the lion. Then, a messenger comes to the door, and the messenger has notice for Hal, saying that the king needs to see him. He needs to see him the next day. He's being summoned before the king, which that means he's going to be upbraided about his riotous life, no doubt. So, Falstaff tells him that we will role play. We will role play your audience before the king. And Falstaff is going to play the king, and Hal himself to know how to answer for his riotous life before the king. Falstaff sits on a stool with a cushion on his head as a crown and starts to talk and big note himself. And Hal says, no. That isn't how a king talks. Now let me play my father and you play my part. And so Hal takes his place on the throne and imitates his father. While Falstaff expounds on all the things. Yes, banish Pistol, banish Bardolph, banish Nym, but banish Plump Jack. Banish Plump Jack, and you banish all the world. And Hal says, as his father, I do. And then, as himself, the future king, I shall. But this moment is interrupted by the knock on the door. It is the sheriff. The sheriff has come. There has been the theft of the travellers has been traced to the tavern. Everybody scrams except for Prince Hal. But Falstaff hides, and while he's hiding manages to fall asleep. And the sheriff asks for information on this robbery. Now, this robbery has happened in just now, and £30, or it might be £300, it's a lot of money, has been stolen. So, but Prince Hal protects his friends and says, no, nothing here, nothing here. When the sheriff leaves, he goes and picks Falstaff's pockets. Because he knows, along with the message about being summoned to the palace to be upbraided for his behaviour is that Hotspur has rebelled and he knows war is coming. He picks Falstaff's pockets, takes a ring, takes a whole pocket full of promissory notes. There's no money that Falstaff has. He owes money everywhere, mostly for drink and food. And he decides that Falstaff can lead 300 foot soldiers in the upcoming war, because the fat old man should do some walking. Now, Hotspur is now in Wales and he is discussing with Glendower the apportioning of England once they win the battle. They have lured people to their side. However, Hotspur is not particularly happy with the way Glendower has apportioned England. He is not happy with this at all. Nor is he particularly impressed with Glendower's way of talking in mystical ways, as though, is real, and as though he's some sort of superhuman hero. I can tell you he's not a superhuman hero. We haven't been making those for a very long time. So he rather annoys Hotspur, but he's managed to keep a lid on it. So this little rebellion of theirs is not so happy as perhaps they might have liked to think it would be. So, needless to say, they managed to patch things up. Hotspur's wife is now there, as is his brother-in-law, and Glendower has promised men for the upcoming battle. Back in London, Hal is being upbraided by his father. He has come to the palace and he finds his father in a terrible, terrible mood. Hotspur is now in rebellion, someone who he had just considered him a worthy, wish that his Hal and Hotspur's father had their Hal switched. And now Hotspur is in rebellion and his own son is living a wastrel life. And this he tells him, I went into exile, I was like a comet barely seen. And when I came back with that majesty and that force, so that people were shocked to see me. You, my son, on the other hand, are like Richard, who was so seen the people got sick of him. Richard, who was frivolous and stupid and not at all kingly as he ought to have been. You, my son, are like Richard. Hal does not take this terribly well. Well, he doesn't take it too badly. He knew he was going to get upbraided, which is why he was practicing on Falstaff. But Hal doesn't protest. He takes this ticking off and swears that he will be the son that his father wants. He swears that he will bring glory back to himself and prove himself a worthy heir. Mind you, all of this rather reminds me of when I first got married. So you all remember when I first got married and my mother went and had a big sulk until I came back up topside. Painful smother. Anyway, so, we were off on our honeymoon, Hades and I, sailing a barge down the River Styx, a barge that would have made Cleopatra green with envy. But we were only just back. I had barely unpacked when I had to go back up. And seriously, just no respect, just up. Me, Queen of the Underworld. Queen of the Underworld, treated with such disrespect. And so then because my mother was having a complete freak out, and then I had to spend time with her, because apparently I can't just go and get married. Then after that, every visit, she's on at me. Why can't you be more like your sister Athena? Athena doesn't wear goth makeup. Athena doesn't have horns. Yeah, well, Underworld, mother, Underworld. Athena helps the heroes. Athena does this. Athena does that. I hate Athena. I hate her. I hate her so much. Anyway, I haven't heard a lot of that lately. See, Hades and I have a complete neutrality policy. We don't get involved in upstairs politics. Upstairs politics is their problem. Down below here, this is our realm, and it is quite big enough for us. We have no desire to go upstairs. And my mother finally shut up and didn't mention my fashion or my horns or the fact that I like to go drinking with my brother cousin Dionysus. After Athena and Hera and Poseidon all tried a coup all plotted a coup against Father Uncle Zeus. Oh, they got in trouble. They got in trouble for that. They even got him they had got him to the point of he was tied up, and Theseus unchained him. But needless to say, Father Uncle Zeus, not happy. Not happy. It also didn't impress my mother when at the wedding of Theseus, when Eris threw the golden apple at all the goddesses and said, boom, he's for the most beautiful, knowing the kind of cat fight that would cause, and Aphrodite and Athena, horse-faced Athena, and Hera all grasped for the apple. My mother was very, very impressed that I didn't stir. Why would I stir? I don't need a stupid golden apple to know I'm prettiest. I get told frequently. You see, the only reason they went for it, and frankly they should have left it for Aphrodite, I mean, duh. But Hera just doesn't get a lot of compliments, and Athena doesn't get a lot of compliments either. Not with that great horse face of hers. Or the fact that she's so straight-laced and none of the boys want to go near her. Not even Ares. So my mother was really quite impressed with that. And after those two little incidents, the golden girl rather fell off her perch and she stopped complaining about me. Okay, she still complains, but not nearly as bad as she used to, which is good, because that was like really bad. Not terribly nice being compared unfavorably to somebody else in your extended family. So, I can fully understand where Hal is coming from. Meanwhile, back in the tavern, Falstaff has discovered his pockets have been gone through and has accused Mistress Quickly. Because Mistress Quickly denies everything to do with that. And they are arguing backwards and forwards, and he's being incredibly rude, especially since even if she did go through his pockets, she would be perfectly justified with the amount of money she has lent him and the 12 shirts and the huge bar bill he has. But Hal comes and he informs Falstaff, I went through your pockets. Here you go. And stop abusing Mistress Quickly. Falstaff, in his usual roundabout way, does apologise, sort of. And Hal informs him that he is now the leader of 300 men in the upcoming wars. Hal and Pons leave to join the wars, and Falstaff is left with, well, there is money to be made out of this. The next time that we come across them, well, firstly, we go and visit Hotspur, who is informed on this eve of battle that his father is ill and will not be bringing the troops that they need. Nor has Glendower brought the troops that they need, and they are stuck with this smaller army than the king's. They don't have a lot of choice here. They could either surrender and throw themselves on the king's mercy, or fight and die. Hotspur is rather of the opinion that fight or die is the best of the two options available to him. And this is what he reports to the herald of the king, that they are, the herald of the king comes to get the rebellion to throw themselves on their mercy, but Hotspur will not. He starts expounding all their grievances, which is tedious, and begs leave to send his message the next morning. So this is the messenger leaves. But Hotspur really has no intention of not fighting. Hal, on the way to battle, meets up with Falstaff, who's leading his now 150 men, who were not really the men that he was originally given. But Falstaff doesn't really care. What he's done is he's allowed the 300 to buy themselves out of service. And then he's used some of the money, kept a lot for himself, but used some of the money to buy assorted riffraff from the prisons and beggary places. And he doesn't really care because they're all going to end up dead anyway. You know, they're all just as well to fill up the ground as any. And so this is Falstaff's men, a man of utter dishonour. Not a jot of honour in Sir John Falstaff. The morning of the battle, Hotspur's uncle comes to the king. The king offers to show mercy to the rebels should they back down. However, and Hal offers to fight in single combat with Hotspur to settle the battle instead of fighting a war, instead of both armies fighting. To spare all of this, he offers this. just as Paris and Menelaus fought in the Iliad until Aphrodite went and pulled Paris off the battleground when he was going to be killed. So that didn't quite work. But Hotspur's uncle, who is rather convinced that while Hotspur may be forgiven for his part of the rebellion, he and his brother will certainly not be forgiven for theirs, decides not to tell Hotspur of this magnanimous offer. And instead, the armies go to battle, though he does mention the offer of single combat with Hal. As the armies go to war together. Hotspur's army is smaller and he hasn't got the support that he expected. The king's army is victorious. They're a bigger army and the day goes their way. However, having the bigger army does not necessarily mean the day's going to go your way. Take a look at Richard. Richard had the bigger army, but the day did not go his way. Poor valiant king. So Henry IV's army is victorious. Hal and Hotspur meet on the battlefield, and Hal tells Hotspur, "You are no longer going to stand in my way. You are no longer going to eclipse me. I am the Prince of Wales, not you." And so they fight. They fight and Hal is victorious. Hotspur is killed. Now, Falstaff, mind you, has found a way to avoid getting killed in battle. He's been playing possum. He also has been, picking up purses and whatnot from the battlefield. He's not a very honourable man, is Falstaff. And Hal comes across Falstaff thinking him dead and says kind words about his reprobate friend, and then leaves, finally agreeing to have his wounds tended, for he wasn't going to do that until he had encountered Hotspur. Both were looking for the other in the battle. Falstaff, having watched this fight and deciding that, well, perhaps Hotspur too could be playing possum, I better stab him to make sure he's actually dead, and then I can claim that I killed him. So that is entirely what he does. Of course, he then comes across Prince Hal, who is being supported by his younger brother John, carrying Hotspur's body to claim reward, only to have Hal tell him, "I killed him. You didn't kill him." Yes, I stabbed him in the thigh." Fine, have it, and have the reward. But so the battle is won, but not the war. This is where the play ends. The rebellion is still about. Hotspur may be dead, but the other rebellious leaders, Hotspur's uncle has been captured and executed, but Douglas, the Scottish lord, has been ransomed to Hal, and Hal has given him his freedom. But there is still Glendower to deal with, and there is still Hotspur's father. There is still discontent in the land. But at least Hal has shown that, whatever I might be, I'm not a traitor. So that is Henry IV, Part 1. At some point, I guess I'll give you part 2. But you'll have to wait for that. Not sure what I'll bring you next. Possibly a comedy. So, until we meet again, bye-bye.